On a bright morning, Richard Rawlings, the famous star of Fast and Loud, was living the dream until everything changed in an instant. The man who built an empire on cars and charisma faced a heartbreaking tragedy no one saw coming. What happened to Richard wasn't just about the loss of someone close. It shattered his world in ways we can hardly imagine. This wasn't just a setback. It was a life-altering moment that threw him into emotional turmoil. Behind the scenes of the TV star we all know, there's a story of heartbreak, struggle, and resilience. But what led to this dark chapter in Richard's life? And how did he cope with it all? In today's video, we're diving into the tragic event that forever changed Richard Rawlings. Stay with us to discover the untold story behind the heartache and the lessons Richard learned on his road to recovery. Long before he became a television icon and self-made millionaire, Richard Rawlings was just a kid growing up in Fort Worth, Texas, surrounded by the unmistakable scent of motor oil and the roar of revving engines. His childhood wasn't bathed in luxury or convenience. Born on March 30th, 1969, Rawlings came from a blue-collar background where money was always tight, and dreams often had to be put on hold in favor of responsibilities. His father, Ray Rawlings, played a pivotal role in shaping Richard's obsession with cars. The two would spend hours in the garage tinkering with engines, going to car shows and watching races, planting the seed of what would eventually become a lifelong passion. But this early passion was only a bright spot in an otherwise difficult upbringing. Richard's mother left the family when he was still young, creating a void in his life that he rarely speaks about. Raised primarily by his father, he had to grow up fast, not just emotionally, but financially as well. By the time most kids were learning how to ride bikes, Richard was already hustling. He took on odd jobs like delivering newspapers, mowing lawns, and eventually working in garages. He even bought and sold his first car before he could legally drive. This early exposure to the harsh realities of life would mold his unrelenting work ethic. He understood that nothing was going to be handed to him. If he wanted anything in life, he had to fight for it. School wasn't exactly his favorite place either. Richard didn't thrive in traditional education environments, often butting heads with authority figures and being written off by teachers who didn't recognize his street-smart intelligence. He was more interested in learning how things worked, how to fix and flip them, and how to make a profit, lessons that couldn't be taught in a classroom. Yet, despite his drive, he often felt like an outsider, someone who didn't quite fit in, which only fueled his desire to prove everyone wrong. The emotional impact of his fractured home life, financial insecurity, and social isolation never quite left him. It lingered behind his confident smile and flashy personality, giving depth to the man the world would come to know as the face of Gas Monkey Garage. These early life struggles weren't just character building. They were battle scars that set the tone for the triumphs and tragedies that would follow. From those early garage days with his father to the emotional weight of a broken home, Richard Rawlings' origin story is one of grit, survival, and a relentless pursuit of something greater than the life he was born into. As Richard's relentless pursuit of a better life began to take shape, it would lead him down paths that no one, not even he, could have predicted. But just as success seemed within reach, an unexpected twist would threaten everything he had worked for. Would the boy who learned to hustle from an early age be able to navigate the obstacles about to be thrown his way? Or would the shadows of his past rise up to challenge his dreams? The moment of his greatest triumphs might be closer than ever, but first he would face something that would test not just his resolve, but everything he believed in. Stay tuned as we uncover the unknown stories behind Richard Rawlings' rise to fame, and the deep personal struggles that almost destroyed it all. One of the most terrifying and life-altering moments in Richard Rawlings' life occurred not under the bright lights of television, but on a dark and quiet Texas street, long before Fast and Loud ever hit the airwaves. In his 20s, Rawlings was the victim of a violent carjacking that nearly cost him everything, including his life. He was stopped at a gas station when the nightmare unfolded. A man approached him with a gun, demanding that Rawlings hand over his car. In the split second it took to process what was happening, the situation escalated. Rawlings was shot at, a terrifying blur of chaos and fear that would leave an indelible scar on his psyche. Though he managed to escape with his life, the trauma of being held at gunpoint never really faded. In interviews, Rawlings has spoken about it sparingly, often with a forced laugh or a brush of bravado, but those close to him know the incident shook him to his core. That one encounter with death gave him a new perspective on the fragility of life, and it became a wake-up call. If there had ever been a moment when Rawlings realized he had to chase his dreams now rather than later, it was this one. He knew he couldn't waste time. Life could be taken in a blink, and the fear of dying before accomplishing what he wanted became a driving force behind his hustle. But this wasn't the only dangerous encounter he faced. Over the years, Rawlings has put himself in risky situations, from dealing with high-stakes business negotiations in shady environments to pushing the limits of speed on the road and track. For a man addicted to adrenaline and the chase, danger seemed to follow him like a shadow. And yet, the most haunting part of the carjacking wasn't just the moment a gun was pointed at his chest, it was what it did to him afterward. Richard developed a sense of distrust, especially when it came to people's intentions. He became more guarded, more focused on control, and less likely to open up. Behind the wheel of a high-powered muscle car, he felt safe, in charge, and unshakable. But in real life, those cracks would occasionally show through flashes of anger, moments of withdrawal, and the occasional decision driven more by fear than strategy. What that incident taught him was that security is an illusion, and that no matter how fast you drive or how successful you become, you're never truly untouchable. Richard Rawlings would go on to build an empire, but the memory of that near-death experience stayed locked somewhere deep inside, a constant reminder that he was lucky to be alive and that every moment had to count. As Richard Rawlings built his empire, it seemed like nothing could touch him. But little did he know, the shadows of his past weren't finished with him yet. The traumatic carjacking that shaped his mindset would eventually come back to haunt him in unexpected ways, challenging everything he had worked for and every belief he had come to hold dear. How did the past come crashing into his future? Was Rawlings really in control of his life? Or was he still running from something far deeper? The tension was building, and it was about to take him to places he never imagined. Stay tuned. Long before Richard Rawlings became a household name, he had already experienced the kind of crushing failure that most entrepreneurs dread, but few ever talk about openly. What many fans of Fast and Loud and Gas Monkey Garage don't realize is that Rawlings didn't just springboard into success overnight. He clawed his way there after hitting rock bottom more than once. His journey to financial stability and fame was paved with disappointment, burned bridges, and businesses that simply didn't make it. One of his earliest ventures was a printing and advertising company called Lincoln Press. While the company eventually found some footing, it was far from an instant success. Richard poured everything he had into it: time, money, energy, often sacrificing sleep and his personal life just to keep the business afloat. But during its early years, Lincoln Press struggled to stay solvent, and Rawlings found himself drowning in debt. He was using one credit card to pay off another, and sometimes even skipping meals to keep the lights on at the office. The reality of running a business without deep pockets or outside investors weighed heavily on him. Things only got worse when he tried to juggle multiple side hustles at once, including selling cars, flipping used parts, and hustling promotional gigs. Many of these ventures failed to generate profit and instead siphoned away more of his already limited resources. Every time something didn't work out, it chipped away at his confidence. There were moments when he genuinely questioned whether he was cut out for success. He contemplated giving up, walking away from the world of entrepreneurship altogether, but something inside him refused to quit. That deep-seated grit he'd carried since childhood kept him pressing on. He was no stranger to struggle, and he'd come too far to give up easily. There was a time when Richard Rawlings was so financially unstable that he had to sell his personal vehicles, including cars he cherished, just to make rent or pay off a looming bill. Each time he let go of a prized possession, it wasn't just about losing a car. It was about sacrificing pieces of his identity, his dreams, his passions. But these moments of financial despair would later serve as fuel for the fire that built Gas Monkey Garage. In retrospect, it's clear that failure wasn't just part of Rawlings' story. It was the cornerstone. The lessons he learned through financial hardship, mismanagement, and hard knocks became the wisdom that guided him once he got his big break. And even now, when the cameras are rolling and the brand looks unstoppable, Richard never forgets those early days of eating dirt, dodging creditors, and scraping by on fumes. They remind him that failure didn't destroy him. Fast and Loud, fame, and the price of success. When Fast and Loud first aired on the Discovery Channel in 2012, Richard Rawlings quickly became a breakout star. His charisma, quick wit, and no-nonsense attitude made him instantly recognizable. The show gave audiences a behind-the-scenes look at Gas Monkey Garage, where classic cars were rebuilt, restored, and flipped for profit. It had all the right ingredients for success: fast cars, dramatic deadlines, mechanical wizardry, and personality-driven entertainment. But while the show brought Richard wealth, fame, and global recognition, it also came with a steep price, one that many viewers never got to see. Behind the scenes, Rawlings was dealing with immense pressure to deliver not just high-performance vehicles, but also television gold. Every build had to be entertaining, every episode had to be engaging, and the stakes kept getting higher. As the face of the franchise, he carried the weight of everyone's expectations, and that pressure began to take a toll on his personal and professional life. One of the most publicized consequences of this pressure was the breakdown of his relationship with Aaron Kaufman, his longtime business partner, and the mechanical genius behind many of the garage's builds. Their dynamic was magnetic on camera, Rawlings as the fast-talking, big-picture entrepreneur, and Kaufman as the meticulous, bearded craftsman. But over time, creative differences, clashing priorities, and the relentless pace of filming strained their partnership. In 2017, Kaufman left the show in the garage, and although the departure was amicable on the surface, it sent shockwaves through the fanbase. It also left Rawlings to face a difficult reality. The show and the business would never be the same again. He was forced to rebuild, not just the team at Gas Monkey, but also the energy that once made the show electric. Fame also brought scrutiny. Every move Richard made was analyzed by the media and fans. His leadership style was questioned, his business decisions dissected. Some accused him of caring more about TV ratings than cars. Others criticized the show for leaning too heavily into drama at the expense of authenticity. And yet, Rawlings stayed the course, knowing that the success he had built came from taking risks and refusing to play it safe. What most people didn't see was the exhaustion, the sleepless nights, and the emotional wear and tear that came with being the face of a global brand. Fast and Loud turned Richard Rawlings into a celebrity, but it also turned his life into a non-stop performance. He had to be on all the time, not just for the cameras, but for sponsors, fans, employees, and the reputation he had worked so hard to build. The fame gave him everything he thought he wanted, but it also took pieces of him along the way. While Richard Rawlings was becoming a household name in the automotive and television world, his personal life was unraveling behind closed doors. Fame and fortune often give the illusion of a perfect life, but for Richard, success came at the cost of emotional stability and meaningful relationships. Perhaps no aspect of his personal life better reflects this than his tumultuous relationship with Suzanne Rawlings. The two were high school sweethearts who married, divorced, then remarried, only to divorce again. Their relationship was marked by intense love, deep connection, and equally painful fallouts. Fans of Fast and Loud may remember Suzanne making occasional appearances or being mentioned, but very few knew how much of a grounding force she once was for Richard, or how devastating their final split turned out to be for him. Their first marriage ended due to the mounting pressure of Rawlings' early business failures. Financial struggles, long work hours, and stress wore down their relationship. Despite the heartache, they found their way back to each other in 2015, hopeful that with Richard's newfound success, they could build a more stable future. But even with money in the bank and cameras rolling, old wounds reopened. The second time around, Richard's schedule was even more demanding. His days were consumed by television production, business meetings, traveling for promotions, and managing Gas Monkey Garage. The very success that was supposed to make their second chance easier became the wedge that drove them apart again. Their 2019 divorce was quiet and civil, but the emotional impact was far from minor. Rawlings often portrays himself as confident and carefree, always in control. But those who know him personally say that behind the bravado is a man who has deeply struggled with feelings of loneliness and isolation. Being constantly surrounded by people doesn't mean you aren't alone. Between filming schedules and business expansions, he spent many nights in hotel rooms, away from family, questioning whether all the sacrifices were worth it. In interviews, he has hinted at regret, not just over lost relationships, but over not being present for some of the most important moments in his own life. The world may see the polished, successful Richard Rawlings, but very few have seen the version of him grappling with heartbreak, questioning love, and yearning for something deeper than fast cars and fast fame. His journey through marriage, divorce, and everything in between paints a picture of a man who has everything money can buy but still struggles to find lasting happiness. The personal tragedies, the lost love, the failed second chances, the emotional loneliness, aren't just footnotes in his story. They're major turning points that shaped who he is, reminding us all that behind the empire is still just a man, trying to make sense of it all. As Fast and Loud continued to dominate television ratings and Richard Rawlings' name became synonymous with American car culture, he began expanding his brand far beyond the garage. One of the most ambitious ventures was the launch of the Gas Monkey Bar and Grill, which opened in 2013 in Dallas, Texas. What started as a bold entrepreneurial move quickly became a hotspot, a fusion of live music, cold beer, and Texas-sized meals that attracted tourists, fans, and locals alike. For a few years, it looked like Richard had struck gold again. The venue was packed, merchandise was flying off the shelves, and Rawlings seemed poised to build a full-blown lifestyle empire. But behind the booming music and bright neon signs, the business was starting to fracture, legally, financially, and emotionally. What most people didn't know was that Richard Rawlings had a silent war brewing with his business partners. Tensions began building behind closed doors over control, vision, and revenue distribution. Richard, who had built his empire through grit and hands-on hustle, felt boxed out of decisions and increasingly frustrated with how the bar was being operated. The name Gas Monkey was his brand, one he had spent decades building, and now it was being used in ways that, in his view, strayed from the core identity he had worked so hard to create. By 2018, things had reached a boiling point, and Richard filed a lawsuit against his own partners, alleging they were mismanaging the business, misusing funds, and excluding him from key operations. The lawsuit sent shockwaves through fans and the Dallas business community. Rawlings wasn't just trying to recover lost profits, he was fighting to protect his legacy. The legal battle dragged on for years, and by the time the dust settled, the damage had already been done. He ultimately severed ties with the bar and grill, losing control over a piece of his empire that had once seemed like a natural extension of his brand. It wasn't just a business loss, it was personal. It was the kind of blow that no one sees coming, not even someone as seasoned as Rawlings. To walk away from something he helped build, something that bore his brand's name, was like watching a part of his identity get torn away in slow motion. The aftermath left him both disillusioned and more guarded than ever. Trust became harder to give. New ventures came with more caution. The very ambition that once propelled him forward now came with shadows of betrayal. For Rawlings, losing the Gas Monkey Bar and Grill wasn't just a financial hit. It was an emotional gut punch, a reminder that even the strongest brands can unravel when trust fades. It became another hard-earned lesson in a life full of them, that success without control can feel a lot like failure. As Fast and Loud continued to dominate television ratings and Richard Rawlings' name became synonymous with American car culture, he began expanding his brand far beyond the garage. One of the most ambitious ventures was the launch of the Gas Monkey Bar and Grill, which opened in 2013 in Dallas, Texas. What started as a bold entrepreneurial move quickly became a hotspot, a fusion of live music, cold beer, and Texas-sized meals that attracted tourists, fans, and locals alike. For a few years, it looked like Richard had struck gold again. The venue was packed, merchandise was flying off the shelves, and Rawlings seemed poised to build a full-blown lifestyle empire. But behind the booming music and bright neon signs, the business was starting to fracture, legally, financially, and emotionally.